So today I'm going to give you a broad overview of the landing site assessment process that we've gone through for ESA's Prospect instrument. And today I'm going to present this work on behalf of the landing site working group for Prospect, who are listed on the screen. Okay. So Prospect has been mentioned quite a bit over the last few days, but just for some context, as Maria outlined earlier, Prospect is going to be one of the instruments that is on the NASA-CLPS 22 mission. And Prospect is made up of two parts: a drill known as Proceed that is designed to sample the lunar surface of up to 1 meter depth. And then these samples will be examined by the onboard laboratory known as ProSpar. So the key thing with Prospect is that it's designed to measure volatiles and sample water ice from the lunar surface. And therefore we want to find a landing site that is volatile rich. And a bit later on in this session, David Hasber will present Rich's presentation, and so you'll have a little bit more information about Prospect then. So I'm going to give kind of an overview of the process we've gone through so far. So we started with a broad overview of the Lunar South Polar region from 75 to 90 degrees south. And then we added in the constraints of the NASA-CLPS mission, in particular the slope, the landing site ellipse, the illumination, earth visibility, and in particular for Prospect, we were focusing on looking for areas where volatiles and water ice would be stable if present. We then assessed the sites that we identified for risk and their operational windows available. And from this, some of the sites we'd identified didn't have quite as many operational windows as we'd like, and therefore new areas that were identified which had longer and more frequent operational windows. These areas were narrowed down further, and then a preferred area for Prospect has been identified. So just for some context, this is the Lunar South Polar region from 75 to 90 degrees south. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, and this is the area where volatiles are expected. So on the left-hand side, we have a WAC mosaic of the South Pole, and on the right, an elevation map from the LOLA data. And you can see in blue the areas where there's low elevation, typically the craters and the crater floors. And then in red and yellow, areas of higher elevation, typically the plateaus and ridges. So what were the constraints that we had? We were asked to look for an area that was within 84 degrees and poleward, so going towards the South Pole. We were required not to land in an Artemis Candidate 3 site. And the landing site needs to meet the requirements of Prospect, particularly scientifically interesting thermally. It should be a safe site, therefore where there were slopes of less than 10 degrees and with no observable hazards, or as few as possible, that were greater than 5 meters in diameter, in particular craters and boulders. We had a 100-meter diameter landing ellipse, and for this study we were focusing on finding the best candidates for Prospect scientifically. So how did we do this? We were using geographical information software ArcPro, and we identified 49 points of interest. And these were points where there were slopes of 10 degrees or less. Both the Oxford thermal model and the Page thermal model showed water, ice, and thermal conditions. And there was on average 30% illumination and 50% earth visibility. We then narrowed down these 49 sites to just 4, using an iterative process and a science matrix. And this science matrix asks questions that would see if the site met the requirements of Prospect. So for example, does the site have thermal conditions for water ice between 0 and 10 centimeters? If the site did meet this question and answered yes, then it would score a higher point. And if it answered no, it would score a lower point. And then these scores were totaled up for each of the questions asked, and the highest ranked site was POI 12, which is located just above Shackleton here. Now, this site was really interesting scientifically, but unfortunately, operationally was not quite as good. And so then, and this was because of the solar elevation being really low, so close to the poles. So we went back to the original list of points of interest, there was original 49, and we identified 4 more sites that were at a kind of lower latitudes and therefore had higher solar elevation angles. And the area that we decided to focus on was this POI 37 up here on the plateau. And so the selected area was this kind of square diamond region. And within this, we mapped out a polygon where the slopes and thermal conditions and illumination had good conditions and also met the requirements from the other payloads. And within this kind of polygon, or the blob as we called it, there was 5 points that were identified from one of the other payloads to investigate further. So I'm going to go through some of the data sets that we looked at. So on the left, we have the NAC maximum illumination mosaic, and what you can hopefully see throughout this is the illumination varies across the blob, including some small PSRs. And then on the right, we have the slope map, which was derived from a shape from shading DEM of 5 meters per pixel. And you can see that most of the area was blue, so this was good. It had very low slopes, so it was an area that was graded good in terms of safety. Then thermally, we looked at both the Oxford thermal model and the Page thermal model at 120 meters per pixel. And all 5 sites at this resolution showed ice depth between the shallow subsurface. And then we also looked at the diviner temperatures for both the summer and winter. And most of the 5 points had temperatures between 50 to 100 Kelvin. And the ones that had better thermal conditions in terms of temperature were these two and this one to the right. And so these were the 3 that we then focused on further and narrowed down to the site where we wanted to do some hazard mapping. So we did hazard mapping of craters, degraded craters, and boulders, and this was done for those 3 points that I just pointed out before. And the region that you can see on the right-hand side here, the NAC, is the area between those the 2 points that are closest to each other, and this was the area that was identified as the preferred region due to the better thermal conditions that have been modelled and the temperatures in this area. As you can see, there's many hazards and lots of craters, but most of these are smaller than that 5 meter requirement. And therefore, although it appears quite crater terrain, there's not too many of the bigger craters that would cause an obstacle. And we just want to say thank you to Maria Banks and the LROC team for their efforts with the mapping and also their help with other dataset production. So just to conclude, we've identified an area that's suitable for the thermal conditions for Prospect and also is operationally good. We're going to be doing some thermal analysis on the illumination and direct-to-earth communication to check this preferred area, and then we'll be doing detailed analysis to look at feature distribution and the sizes of features in the area, and also regional analysis and further high-resolution thermal modelling and illumination modelling. Thank you.